All right, so I know Matt talked a little bit about who we are, OCC. It's interesting because almost nobody really knows who we are. If you Google OCC, the first thing that comes up will be the Office of Comptroller of the Currency. Not us. The regulators were kind of the victims of regulation. The next one that comes up is Orange County Chopper, which I could try probably very hard, but I would not be able to get the kind of facial hair necessary to be part of that group. So OCC is Options Clearing Corporation. So who we are is the common clearing party, the CCP, for all U.S. traded options transactions. So it's kind of good that we're little known. It's really only when we get pressed that we get pressed only when bad things happen. So not knowing us isn't always that bad. To kind of create a linkage maybe to your organizations too, we are a very high transaction volume organization, but we're focused on risk management. So I think in a lot of ways, a lot of your organizations are probably in a similar situation, and we'll get to the regulation piece because everybody gets to enjoy that. Another thing too is my title is up there, is Director of Business Process Improvement, but really what I do day in and day out is risk management. Every project, every effort that we do, it's risk-centric. It's trying to eliminate risk wherever it exists. Even to some degree, even at another level, we are like the mitigators of the mundane. There's some mundane, repetitive tasks that are out there that create like this insidious layer of risk that really goes unrecognized. So that is a little bit what I do. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about OCC. I think I hit the wrong button. There we go. Here we go. So this is the really long description of who we are. But again, just to kind of draw that linkage between your organizations and mine. Cost efficient, customer driven. Does that sound familiar to anybody? I mean, that's in our statement. That's pretty pervasive. And the same thing with risk management. We're all in that industry in one degree or another. The other item that I've highlighted there is how we are looked at by our regulators, is providing financial stability for market participants, investors, and the economy. It's a little bit daunting, but it gives you an idea of who we are and where we fit in the ecosystem. So we really have three core businesses. So the first is that clearing and settlement services. Again, high volume transactions. You can read into that. We're the issue and guarantor of U.S. listed options. Risk management is what that's all about. And then lastly, we also operate a CCP-based stock loan program. So we offer clearing in that business. So that's a growing business, and it kind of creates its own challenges in and of itself. This is my favorite slide. These first few slides were given to me by our corporate communications group, and it's kind of the standard boilerplate stuff. But when I first saw this, I asked our team, why did we use a turtle? To me, it looks like a turtle with a crown. And their comment was they're never going to be able to look at the slide again the same way. But it does a really good job of depicting our ecosystem. So we've got our exchanges, we've got our regulators, we've got our CCP stock loan program. But more importantly is as I refer to as the crown, is that group at the top. The mutual funds, pension funds, those are using terms, and in the end, it's investors. And those are the people that we really think about when we're doing our projects. It's not just a fund, it's people's pension, it's people's savings, it's people's college funds. I have a 17-year-old who's going off to college next year. Believe me, I'm very concerned about where those funds are at and how they're going to look when I need them. So when we do our work, we focus on that. So let me tell you about our challenge. And if you're in the financial industry, in insurance, in pharma, regulation is a constant and growing reality. Dodd-Frank kind of hit us like a tidal wave. it changed the way we made decisions. It changed the way we operated. 2012, we were designated as a SIFMU, a systemically important financial market utility, which all it really means is that instead of having one set of eyes over our shoulder all the time, we now had three. So not only did the SEC and the CFTC keep an eye on everything we do, the Fed joined us, and so we're in a constant state of exam, to be honest with you. Every one of our business lines is being looked at constantly, and so that pushed us into making some hard decisions and trying to decide what to do next. So we first looked at, let's focus on process, because that's kind of the building block and where we can go from there. The next thing we want to do is take a look within each of those processes and try to identify what are the risks to those processes, and next, what controls exist there. And sometimes that's kind of a narrow view, because you're ignoring then some of the other tasks that are out there. And those other tasks also present risk if you just focus on controls. So in every project that we begin, we look first at what is the process, who is impacting, but then the next stage is what are the risks that are there. And are they just a risk within that one segment of our business, or is it throughout the whole enterprise? And so then we start even digging a little bit further and taking a look at what's the risk of every task, what's going on there. Another thing we look at is within those tasks, how manual are those things? How mundane is it for our knowledge workers to be doing, really routine, mundane type work? So what I'm going to do is kind of go in a little more detail about why we chose Appian, and then also one particular application that we built out. So we saw Appian as a good opportunity for us to address those risks, particularly those controls and those manual tasks. And hopefully, and we seem to be going down the right path, and that so far our statistics are showing that we're doing the right things, we're picking the right projects, we're addressing the right risks. At least our regulators and our control groups within our organization are blessing that approach. So we'll talk about our application, one in particular, but also talk about our process. So we've got a really interesting dynamic between my team, which is on the business side, and our IT team. We're unique within the organization. We're still a very old style business in that we've got an IT group and a business group. But my team in our Appian practice is a little bit more unique. We team up constantly. My counterpart on the IT side, we talk at least 3 times a week, sometimes more. We are not in meetings without each other, so that we're always on the same page. And that's made a big difference. And other groups are beginning to take notice and starting to follow that path. So let's talk about corporate actions. That's a term that not everyone may be familiar with. Corporate action is the mergers, spin-offs, acquisitions, and so forth. To be quite honest with you, they're a little bit of a pain in the ass. They're a lot of work, and the worst part is if you get them wrong, it's really costly, both monetarily and reputation-wise. So we looked at what we were doing in our own process that existed before Appian in the corporate actions arena. So updating positions, it's people's money. And when we change someone's standing position, it could have a real negative impact if we do it wrong. It also could impact trading. We update listings, so if we update listing incorrectly, someone could be trading on basically the wrong product. So that's also not a good thing. The existing process that existed, it was effective, but it wasn't highly efficient. It was not collaborative in any way, and it was not very transparent. So it really kind of hit on all the right areas. It was high risk, high complexity. It had all these other elements. So it was perfect for automation for us. So I'm going to just kind of walk through how it existed before, and then a little bit on how we went about automating it. So the first stage is we've got people who go out to a number of websites, and they're basically checking what's out there, what's new, what's happening in the corporate action world, what kind of records might need to be updated. Then they were taking all that information and putting it in Excel and tracking it in Excel. And the next thing that would happen is we finally get to a point where it was going to become reality. We knew what the terms of that corporate action was going to be, and we knew that there was kind of a finalized and ready to go state. The next thing that would happen is they'd have to calculate what the change would be. And sometimes do that in Excel, sometimes do it in calculator. Not very low code in any way. Next thing they would do is take all that data, sometimes from Excel, from a lot of other sources, cobble it together in a Word template, and then that would get published on our to our exchanges, to our members, and also on our public website. And then lastly, we would update our legacy system, our clearing system. So along that path, there's so many things that could go wrong. Just human error, a miscalculation, copy and paste error. So when we first started working with this group, the corporate actions team, they thought they had 18 different processes. We started going through, and I'd be honest with you, we did all the writing on the wall and trying to do a bunch of Visio documents. It just wasn't clicking with them. They still thought they had 18. But luckily, we introduced Agile with Appian. And we were able to, through the sprints, through the demos, luckily the corporate actions team had a little trust in us. And they said, well, we'll give you some time. And so week in, week out, we were showing them, look, it's really one process. It works. And in a matter of probably about 3 weeks, about 3 sprints, because we're down to 1 week sprints now, we were able to get them to see, you guys are right. It's one process. It's a lot of different data, but it's still just one process. And we wouldn't have been able to do that without Agile. Being able to show where the progress is, having them be able to see, like, yeah, this works. So that was a big step, and honestly, that went a long way in getting the idea of Agile a lot more accepted within our organization. So collaboration was tough. As I mentioned, there was a lot of stuff in Excel spreadsheets and other documentation, sometimes screen prints and so forth. And we've got an office, we're based in Chicago. We've got a sizable office in just outside Dallas as well. And they weren't sharing data. There were probably ways to do it using SharePoint or some other tools, but they really weren't doing it. They were pretty content with doing Excel and screen prints and just keeping that local. But it did cause some confusion every now and again. Every now and again we do these disaster recovery drills where we work from home for a day and the other city takes over. And there were times those groups typically they wouldn't participate in those drills because they had to keep on doing their line of work, and our Dallas office had to keep on moving on with their data. So before that was a problem. And then with Appian, we had one place to go to, one single source of truth, and more importantly, they could pick up other people's work, and it was the collaboration that we gained was tremendous. We're also able to get away from just the sheer volume of reviews and approvals that were necessary because everything was so manual. So when we had particularly as I mentioned, those memos that had to be put together, they would have to go through a peer review first, and then went to another level review, and then finally management approval. And just, that management approval, they're not always available. They're either on the phone or on WebEx, whatever have you. So now with Appian, they get a task sent to them, and it's completed pretty quickly. They can even do it during WebEx. Obviously, I shouldn't always multitask, but who doesn't? But it keeps things moving. And that has been a major time savings on their side. And it's also been able to release a lot of effort on people that they're tied up doing reviews and second reviews and third reviews. And that made a big difference. All right, so math. Great. Machines can do it without thinking, right? I mean, that's what they're built for. It's not always easy for me. Sometimes we get these oddball corporate actions. Some of them are pretty straightforward. 2-for-1 stock split, that's easy. Some get more difficult. Sometimes we get these really oddballs. They only hit every 3 to 4 years. What they were doing in the past was having to first call up documents, go through these Word documents in Excel, and a host of other things to try to recreate what that looked like before, so they could try to emulate what that should look like in the future, and in particular if they're handling one currently. So now we sat down and we collected all the rules, and we had them go back and pull stuff out, and what are the weird ones that you get. And now all those calculations are in Appian. They're all captured there. They don't have to think. They don't have to rely on faded ink or faded memory to try to recreate what this should look like and make sure they get it right. The nice thing about that too is in terms of auditability, we can pull up that data and show it to our regulators and our auditors simply. Where in the past that was, again, a very difficult thing to do. Interesting that, and really glad to see that new feature on the decision designer is definitely going to take a code that we built in this and put that in decision designer. Not that those kind of calculations change that frequently. It's going to be so much easier when something new comes up to just plug and play. All right, so this was a big win, and this was kind of a funny story. Like I mentioned, they create these memos, and before they're doing a lot of cutting and pasting, and it was difficult. So we mentioned that we could probably do this in Appian. We could build this form, this memo for you. They were a little bit hesitant. They weren't sold. They didn't. They thought it'd be too much trouble. So again, we asked them to give us a little bit of faith, and this one took longer than we had hoped on, to be honest with you. It took about 4 weeks because there was a lot of spacing issues and a lot of things that we had to get down right. But now this is probably the biggest win out of the whole application, is just being able to create this memo. They would spend a lot of time in the past putting this together. It would go around through all the reviews and imagine the cycle when a review catches a problem. It has to go all the way through and cycle back through. And it was difficult. It was really pain. And so getting this where it's generated right out of the application itself was a big win for us. And very proud of that. All right, so kind of as a way to kind of round out that particular application. So we addressed the efficiency issue. Fewer reviews just made life easier. Increased effectiveness too. People were spending less time going over and reviewing and re-reviewing and triple reviewing data. We improved the transparency unbelievably. In the past, if a senior executive wanted to see what we had in the works for corporate actions, there would be a phone call to that team, and they had to pull out a bunch of records and do a lot of, again, copying and pasting. So now our senior executive have access to Appian. They can look in, they can see what's going on, or even what we did last week, what's coming up next week. That transparency it was another way to kind of promote Appian within our organization. We'd go and actually really push some of the executives, like, hey, you can do this, you can look at this, and they finally started doing it, and now they haven't stopped, and now they're asking for more. Improve the collaboration. Now our offices in Dallas and Chicago can work on the same efforts, and it's seamless. The audit burden, as I mentioned, we're constantly being audited, and it would take, as some of our regulars often do, we get the emails on Friday afternoon that they want, probably 400 pages worth of data by, they usually give us a 24-hour window, sometimes 48 hours if we're lucky. We would take a lot of time digging through the records to say, here's what happened on these corporate actions. Literally minutes now. We're able to pull all the history and who signed off and when it was approved and made sure it hit all appropriate control points. It's a piece of cake now. And that's saved a lot of time and a lot of headache. We mitigated the risk, so before copy and paste errors, miscalculations, all that, has been eliminated. And so it's saved a lot of time. And so people can focus on more value-added efforts. We're not done yet, though. When I laid out this, all these steps, we just really dealt with the 4 middle pieces. The part where we've got people going out and checking websites, we haven't dealt with that yet. It's on our list of things to do. And the same thing with updating our clearing system. So more to come. Hopefully we're going to continue pushing and trying to make that as seamless as possible. So hopefully maybe next year we can report back on further success. So let me tell you a little bit about how we work together, myself and the IT team. So my team deals specifically with a platform strategy. So we talk about how we want to make use of it, where we want to use Appian and other automation tools if need be. We prepare the business. So we sit down with them and tell them what it's like to work through Agile and what to think about and how to, and trying to get them to understand minimal viable product. It's not always easy, but it's something we try to do. We also do process reviews. We also created and provide the governance over the entire program. We also do the business architecture work too. So that's part of my team. My counterparts on the IT team, they do design, development, QA, and testing for not only the defects, but they also handle enhancements, new projects, all the upgrades. They're a very busy team, pretty small team right now. So we've got the head of that team as well as 2 developers. And we're able to do a lot with those 2 individuals. They're very busy. But, and in fact, our lead developer was here for the conference, and he went home about midday today, so he's got more work to do. We can't have him just sit around here. But he's going to learn. He's going to use a lot of things that we learned yesterday. So we are the first in OCC to try Agile. And there was a lot of apprehension, particularly on our compliance and our internal audit side. And so we talked with them a lot, and we outlined what our governance is, how we were going to go about doing all the appropriate documentation that's necessary, and just keeping in mind it's going to lag. We're going to do the documentation after we do a lot of the development work, and so very untraditional. But the key was really that solid governance. We worked with them really closely and listened to our control groups, and we've got a pretty good relationship now, and things are going well. And now Agile's starting to catch on in OCC. So more teams are looking into it and trying to leverage that. And I think we're going to continue being the front line of that effort. So one of the things we did too, and our challenge was this, our Appian instance is in the cloud. Everything else at OCC is on premise. And so making that connection, connecting our Appian instance to every other system at OCC, or even just a few, is not always easy. And our security teams were very, very hesitant at first. So we've gotten to the point where we've got to work with them enough. They understand what we're trying to do, what we're trying to accomplish. And we now meet with them at the end of every sprint 0. So once we have a pretty good idea, a pretty good approach, we'll sit with them and talk through all the different details about what we're going to try to do and how we're going to do it. It's great back and forth because they can highlight where their concerns are. They can also tell us whether other groups are doing something maybe even similar, or any hiccups that we may encounter. From that point too, after that discussion, we talk about how many times we need to meet throughout the project, just so we have those right touch points. So in some cases, just that one review at the end of sprint 0 is enough. At other times, we meet with them really regularly. We invite them to our demos and just make sure that they're fully with us. So I don't think anyone enjoys regression testing. Testers don't even enjoy regression testing. So what we had before is it was take about 6 man days to go through all the regression testing for our 3 applications at that point in time. We're now up to 9 applications, and our regression test, now that we've automated it, takes less than an hour. So when we're ready for upgrades, we roll right in. It's a pretty straightforward effort on our side. The nice thing about this too is we have mandated that nothing goes into production until that regression script is updated for the new application. So we're not going to get caught behind in any way. So literally, if we rolled something out next week, and there's a new upgrade coming, there's no hesitation. We're there. That script will work, and we'll definitely be ready for those upgrades or any changes that might come. And one thing that we instituted as well is when we push something into production, we consider it a pilot. So a few things that are really nice about this. First, we sit down and we talk with the group about what their exit criteria is going to be. What do they want to see to make sure they're ready to call this production and to call it system of record. We also lay out our own criteria for what we want them to see and check out. This also gives us an opportunity to update all of our documentation. So policies, procedures, all that other stuff can be updated before we call it system of record. Another element to this too is in that preparation work that gives them time to figure out how that tool is changing their own process. So, we update all the Visio documents and so forth, but when they really start using it, they start understanding, well, wait a minute, I could actually be doing these two things at the same time. And so their own practices change. And we make sure that we have that fully documented before calling it, like, this is our system of record going forward. So that is my story. So if anybody has any questions, now is the time.
Yeah, please. I would ask that Deb is kind enough. She has a microphone. We want to make sure we actually catch the questions. Questions?
Thank you. I had a question. I was wondering how many corporate actions do you process per year, and how many users you have?
Great.
And do you have further plans to expand it to other OCC activities?
Yeah. So a typical month, saw that.
We had a chair drop in the earlier session.
Oh, nice.
I don't know if you saw that, but yeah.
Any given month, we're processing about 20 to 25 corporate actions. There's a seasonality to them. The end of typically the December timeframe, that ramps up to about 100, and then they kind of chill out a little bit, and they spike back up again. The corporate action team is about 12 people. We have 100 throughout all of OCC. There's 550 employees. 135 are active users on Appian. And we've got, like I mentioned, there's 9 applications. We're working on our 10th right now. Actually, our first release is tomorrow for that one.
Drew Scarano, please wait for the mic.
Thank you. You mentioned that you're the only system that's in the cloud. Can you talk a little bit about the integration to your core systems and how difficult that was to integrate into your cloud offering?
So I'll take that two ways. So difficult technologically, not a problem. VPN tunnel, piece of cake. Security, that was the challenge. We were the first to do this. And so there was a lot of hesitation and a lot of education that needed to take place. So we worked really closely with our security team. We actually, the Appian security folks helped out a little bit too. So we could talk together and get our own team comfortable. I kind of see that we've made that first leap. Right now, we're finalizing our connection to SharePoint. And then we're also in the process of finalizing our connection then from the cloud to our core clearing system, to our legacy system. And that we should get the approval on that, I think, the end of this week. So yeah, the connectivity piece, the technology piece is really straightforward. That challenge, though, was getting security comfortable.
And just to comment on that, what we're seeing in banking and capital markets is, we're definitely seeing the uptick towards cloud. The conversation has changed. Last year was talk about the value of cloud. Now it's about how do we get there. And luckily, Appian and our cloud team is pretty adept of having these conversations with your CIS team. We're here to help. Just keep that in mind.
Oh,
Just to follow up on that, Michael.
Yeah.
Do you have an idea of like I'm sorry.
No worries.
Do you have an idea of what's really driving that shift towards cloud?
The migration to, you know, it's the number of benefits you're getting, always current is one for sure. It's also a resource drain being on-prem. So we have a number of customers. You're getting the sense that the Appian development teams aren't armies, and that has a lot to do with the core of the technology. You're getting a lot done with fewer number of resources. But when you have to, we have customers that have, you know, a team of 5, when 2 of those 5 are spending all their time worrying about the on-prem install, that's just not the best use of resource. Do you want to talk about?
yeah,
that as well?
actually, just because of the relationship I've got with, like I said, my counterpart on the IT side, he came from the CME. So they just recently migrated from on-prem to the cloud. And so he had lived through an on-prem instance, and the resources needed to support that were pretty high. And partially because of that too, they were really slow to adopt upgrades. And so one of the reasons he enjoyed moving over to my company was that we were in the cloud and just being able to avoid all that. And like I said, now we're usually about 2 weeks behind on the upgrade. Once the upgrades are announced by Appian, we're about 2 weeks after that where we've got that latest upgrade.
Mr. Verber.
Bill, in the short time you've been leading Appian at the OCC, can you talk a little bit how your role has changed, given that you're through your first year? And number 2, you've enjoyed some rapid application delivery and growth. I'll ask you also to talk about the age-old question: how do you prioritize future opportunities?
Good question. So yeah, my role has changed quite a bit. John first approached OCC back in like the end of 2014, roughly. One of John's previous employers became our chief executive. So John had a little bit of in. We talked quite a bit. Really had to sell Appian to OCC. I saw, and another colleague saw the opportunity to make it work. Once we sold that concept, my role changed a great deal. So I became from trying to push something to trying to manage an inflow of requests. Once we had a few projects out there, and you know, the word was good, right? There's a lot of good feedback that things started catching on, and we started getting a little overloaded with work, which leads into the next question. So we developed a pretty substantial decision matrix on what projects we take on. So we measure risk through a few different groups. Our internal audit group measures risk. We've got an ERM group. We also have a business controls group. So we take all that data and we piece that together and try to find where our big hits are. We also look at complexity. So if the process is pretty simple, we count that too. So we try to kind of find that sweet spot of high risk, but something that we know we can tackle pretty adeptly. And sometimes that bothers some people, but we're just using a scorecard. And so it's not always the loudest voice that gets the project. It literally is, we have a scorecard, we don't hide it, that's transparent. We put it on our own internal site and let people be aware of what we think is going to be the next project.
Next question. Ryan.
Since you're in the cloud,
Can you-
how do
what?
you deal with, sorry.
Yeah.
Since you're in the cloud now, how do you deal with like data security issues, cybersecurity and the like, and how you get comfortable around that? That's my first question.
Yeah. So the data that we're holding there, in terms of documentation, so when we finalize the corporate action, I'll give you that example, when we create that memo, once it's complete, it actually is being pushed over to our SharePoint through our VPN connection. So we don't hold a lot of data in the cloud yet. The organization is getting comfortable with it. To be honest with you, I think that the security in our cloud instance is probably stronger in some cases than some of the systems we have internally. And constantly talking back and forth and the Appian security team as well to our own security staff and trying to get them comfortable with having more and more data out there. But there's been times where some groups have been hesitant and they start seeing every other organization that are either Appian clients or anyone else who's in the cloud. Those things are being dealt with, and our organization is getting there in terms of being comfortable with that data. We're not holding that much data in the cloud right now, but there's a number of projects that we're going to definitely be pushing that envelope this year.
My other question is in terms of RPA. Have you looked at RPA as a complementary offering to Appian? Whether it's the rudimentary tasks and whatnot within the workflow process, right?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. So we're looking at it right now. We're looking at it pretty closely. And you probably saw that first step in that corporate actions process, that's ripe. Yeah, however, in some cases, and in that case, it's probably a Band-Aid. We can take care of that, but those sites that we're going to, if I get files from them, it's maybe even a little bit easier. But even if we do go RPA, we want to have Appian as kind of the backbone to that, so we're always getting the audit data and all that information in one place. We don't want it in disparate locations. So when we do get audited, we can go to Appian, pull the data we need, and send that out.
That's great. Thanks, Wayne. I've got one. Your first application was member onboarding,
Yep.
right? You talked about the risk perspective. Did that influence the selection of member onboarding as the first application? And if you had to do it over again, would that be the right starting point?
No, that's a loaded question. It would not be the first one I would choose. The reason we chose member onboarding is because it touched two really big groups in our organization. So our member onboarding goes through part of our financial risk management team and also our membership services team. And so we saw them as, first of all, they're willing participants. They wanted innovation, and so we knew we could attract them and work with them. But yeah, from a risk perspective, it really wasn't all that great. But it got where we needed to because those two groups started telling our story for us, and so they started self-selling. So yeah, it worked out well.
Wait for it.
Bill, I think you may have answered my question in the last response that you gave, but before you used Appian, did you have this business process improvement function? Or was that something that you created with Appian?
Yeah, actually, it's kind of funny because it goes to John's question. So my first role was to fix the process problem at OCC once we got to a point of recognizing that was a way to get out of our and deal with our regulatory constraints. So I was pretty heavily involved in risks and controls and dealing with that, and that's one of the reasons I brought in Appian and why we pushed so hard to bring it in. So yeah, my role changed a great deal as a result, but it's definitely it's a shift in mindset. It kind of works well. I understand risks and controls real well, so it's pretty easy for me to convince people that these are projects to work on and kind of a trusted source. But at the same time, I've always been kind of on the pushing for innovation in our organization, and in a lot of ways, what we did with Appian has become kind kind of a flag bearer. There's other groups now that are looking at, and not necessarily Appian, but how to innovate and how they should do things differently. And it's not always technology. There's lots of ways to fix those problems. I'd rarely get involved in anything that's not automation now. We don't spend that much time digging into a process and trying to make it more efficient, because more often than not, it's going to be technology that's going to make that difference. And so it's interesting, because when we go through, we start with the original. Every group in OCC has a process map, and it changes drastically once we go through Appian. But to them, sometimes it's really startling how much different it becomes, even though they're living through it. When you finally put it on paper again and let them actually play with the system, it's pretty substantial.
So one more question, please.
Just to hit back on the member onboarding,
Yes.
as your first project, I'm curious, once you were comfortable with the risk associated, what the total project time was there? And then if there's a difference in opinion now at where the risk is with that project in particular, like if you feel more comfortable about what's going on in that space versus when you were trying to sell it?
Yeah, no, that's so we did deal with some risk. So probably the biggest was reputational risk. So the onboarding process that existed before, every clear member onboarding that we go through lasts between 6 to 9 months, roughly. It's a very long time. And the story came to me at one point. Our CIO got a call from a member saying, "What's taking so long? We've been at this for 7 months. Where are we?" It took about 3 days for our CEO to get the answer, because he had to call both of the teams that are involved and try to figure out where's this one at. So once we got it in Appian, and he was the first one we showed, like, hey, you can pull anytime you want, you can pull this data up. And so if you get a phone call, you can answer it in a minute instead of waiting 3 days. And so there was that kind of reputational risk that we dealt with. In terms of any real substantial business risk that existed, it was pretty minimal. It was basically a checklist. We had to have these documents, and they had to go through this kind of work. It's definitely one that we'll revisit. There's definitely some opportunities for tuning there, but that project only took 6 weeks, and that was kind of like the sweet spot. We could prove we could do something pretty quickly, make it impactful, and we got to show it off to a lot of people. So that worked out well for us.
It's also a unique variation of onboarding,
Yeah.
right? Because it's member onboarding to the OCC. It's very different than onboarding a wealth management customer, for example, or a banking customer, in terms of the immediate revenue implications of not accelerating that. There really, when it comes to member onboarding, there isn't like a ticking clock. I mean,
No, there isn't. No, it's really a matter of going through all the different checklists, and do we have all the correct information? Do they have the financial stability to be a member, and that kind of work that we do?
So we have lots of customers in banking and capital markets that actually do leverage onboarding as their first use case, but they have different economics associated with onboarding, and it's a different process. So often, and actually I'll advocate for onboarding being the first project, but it's just different because, the OCC story is a risk story, for sure. So with that, please, thank you.
Thank you.